The Scottish Parliament's Culture, Tourism, Europe and External Affairs Committee recently invited views on future funding for culture. It was mainly focused on the 2022-23 budget, but it also raised wider questions on the nature of government support for the cultural sector. Royal Society of Edinburgh convened a working group, which I chaired, which included FRSE fellows and members of the Young Academy of Scotland, who together brought very wide-ranging expertise and practitioner experience in culture and the creative industries. Its submission proposed some recommendations for immediate action and also some longer-term interventions. Now, one major point that was made was that the COVID crisis has highlighted the really important contribution of culture to key sectors like health, education, and the economy. And there is now an opportunity to mainstream culture across those different policy areas as recommended in the culture strategy. In particular, the links between participation and health and well-being were highlighted and foregrounded during successive lockdowns. As the pandemic is likely to leave, unfortunately, a mark on Scotland's well-being and mental health, the potential role of culture becomes ever more important. So the group highlighted the need for a more strategic coordination of and collaboration between culture, health, and social care. Activities such as social prescribing could be one tool to consider. There was a consensus on the particularly damaging impact that COVID had and continues to have across the culture sector. Emergency funding from the Scottish and UK governments has been absolutely essential to survival up to now. But the cultural sector still faces some severe challenges. Many organisations are working with limited or no reserves and looking at an uncertain future as restrictions continue and audience appetite to return remains unclear. We recommended, therefore, continuing government support as the sector recovers, but also sustained longer-term funding in the future that adequately reflects the significant value that government places on culture. We recognised the pivotal role of local government in sustaining Scotland's cultural life, as local community intervention became central to addressing COVID challenges, and we suggested funding to local authorities earmarked for culture. The submission also suggested a number of other proposals for new funding sources, including revisiting discussions on a tourist levy, ticket income subsidy whilst venues have to work at reduced capacity, tax rebates, or creating a system of funding akin to a national investment bank for culture. Now, any support must recognise the different needs of the various actors in the cultural sector, including public, private and third sector organisations, and the large number of freelance workers whose livelihoods have been particularly badly hit. Their futures will rely entirely on the return of a healthy cultural ecosystem with organisations able to commission and employ them. Now, sadly, one of the realities that we face is that some businesses and services will simply not be able to resume their activities. So some restructuring will be necessary. And we argue that the Scottish Government should dedicate funding to help organisations introduce necessary changes and adapt business models. One positive result of the pandemic has been that it's brought new levels of collaboration across the sector to address shared challenges. And we propose that Scottish Government should continue to foster those collaborations in the longer term and provide dedicated funding directed to organisations wishing to work together. The successive lockdowns forced the sector also to change the way it provided services, and they quickly adapted to digital provision. Digital works have proved effective in reaching wider and more diverse audiences. And as we resume normal activities, cultural organisations are likely to continue to making live and digital work for face-to-face and online audiences. But this brings its own set of challenges, and organisations will need support to ensure the necessary infrastructure and skills are in place to bring high-quality productions to diverse audiences. And finally, in implementing any changes, the Scottish Government and the sector must consider the uneven impact COVID-19 has had on women and on people from minority ethnic groups, serving to exacerbate existing inequalities. So equality and accessibility must be priority concerns as new ways to support and develop the sector are devised for the future. Now, this has been a very brief canter through some of the main points of the submission. There's more, and I do recommend that you read the submission in full on the RSE website at www.rse.org.uk. Thank you for listening.